On August 15, 1945, Emperor Showa issued the imperial rescript on the termination of the war, Shusen no Chikusho, marking Japan's surrender. On August 30th, Douglas MacArthur arrived in Tokyo, initiating a 7-year period of American occupation and control. However, following the end of World War II, ordinary Japanese citizens did not escape the abyss of suffering. On the contrary, what awaited them was the searing agony of starvation. From 1944 to early 1947, Japan experienced one of the most severe famines in its modern history. In the later stages of the war, Japan had completely lost command of the sea and all overseas supplies. Its extremely limited domestic resources were maximized for a desperate, last-ditch resistance. Consequently, domestic food production plummeted by 26%, agricultural fertilizers were diverted to military use, iron farm tool production dropped by 75%, and draft animals were requisitioned, pushing Japanese agriculture to the brink of collapse. Victory cooking, Hisho-ryuri, was a dietary slogan promoted by the government right before the defeat. It was essentially a national directive advising citizens to consume absolutely anything they could forage, ranging from pumpkin leaves to acorns, and from snails and house geckos to grass roots and tree bark. Following the defeat, nearly 10 million repatriates from Japan's former colonies were sent back to the home islands. To make matters worse, Japan also suffered from severe droughts in 1944 and 1945. Under the combined impact of these adverse factors, the official wholesale price of grain surged by 539% in the first year of the U.S. occupation. In the black market, which actually dominated the economy, prices were 3 to 4 times higher. Indeed, just 1 month after the U.S. took control, as many as 17,000 black markets of varying sizes had sprung up across the country. The U.S. military turned a blind eye to this, and American GIs were more than happy to enjoy the perks of bartering. Back in the States, a GI might have just been a poor country bumpkin from Mississippi, but in Japan, with a loaf of bread in hand and a couple of canned goods in his pocket, one can easily imagine what he could get in return. Meanwhile, organized crime, Yakuza involvement, and official corruption, social ills deeply loathed by the Japanese people but hard to eradicate, also emerged on a massive scale during this period. As for ramen, against this unique historical backdrop, it transformed from a simple fast food into the most sought-after commodity in the black market. In the restaurant industry, as early as 1941, Japan had implemented a special food rationing system for laborers. This rationing system continued after the war with slight adjustments, and an emergency ordinance for food businesses was issued, banning the sale of the vast majority of food items. Due to the rationing system, most restaurants ceased to exist, and those that barely survived were forced to operate illegally underground. This dire situation persisted until 1947. In that year, an event seemingly unrelated to Japan triggered a fundamental shift in U.S. policy toward the country. Chiang Kai-shek's continuous defeats in China instantly elevated Japan's strategic importance in the eyes of the Americans. In April 1947, the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff issued an aid plan for other countries based on national security considerations. The previous rhetoric of letting the Japanese rebuild their own country was immediately reversed. U.S. aid to Japan increased by 50% that year, and thereafter, shiploads of American wheat arrived in Japan, which the Japanese gratefully accepted without hesitation. Although Japan had been a nation with rice as its absolute staple food for nearly 1,000 years, the Japanese government had to go full throttle to promote American generosity just based on a suggestion from the U.S. Occupation Command. The government even had to announce the arrival of every cargo ship carrying American wheat in the media, using news reports to remind the general public to look at the great grace of the United States. Elementary school students in Tokyo were required to participate in essay competitions on the theme of gratitude for imported food, and there was even an animated film specifically dedicated to praising American benevolence. Various experts who arrived from across the ocean also came out to endorse American wheat, exhausting their imaginations to vouch for its nutritional value. Among them, a section chief at the Ministry of Labor named Yoshio Okichi was the most masterful at his sycophancy. This guy published a book called Nutritional Whims, arguing from the perspective of human evolution that wheat represents rationality and progress. His argument was that wheat requires more complicated processing steps to become food, so countries with a wheat culture possess a more exploratory and progressive spirit. In contrast, rice culture represented laziness and complacency, which would cause people to lose their drive for thinking and invention. In comparison, Kitaro Kimura, a medical professor at Keio University, was much clumsier in his flattery. He directly claimed in his book that as soon as a person eats rice, their mind begins to slow down. He argued that compared to Westerners, the mental capacity of the Japanese had already fallen behind by 20%. Later, this man also produced a promotional booklet on wheat for the government. He didn't bother with formalities or beating around the bush. The title was simply "Eating Rice Makes You Stupid." However, would the U.S. really provide such wonderful wheat for free? Haha, don't be silly. The U.S. presented the bill for this so-called humanitarian aid in 1962. The total cost of the relief supplies was $495 million. But the bigger game was the ultimate goal of the U.S. to change the Japanese dietary habits to increase Japan's dependence on American wheat. When the turbulent politics at the national level reflected onto the small bowl of ramen, a phenomenon that was both amusing and sigh-inducing emerged. Rather eat ramen than bread became a symbolic stubbornness at the time. The logic was that although the public could not change the fact that American wheat dominated the market, they were unwilling to bow to the dietary habits of the occupiers. Under the influence of this coping mechanism, similar to the Aku spirit, ramen quickly shed its identity as Chinese cuisine and became a dietary symbol of spiritual resistance for the Japanese nation in a humiliating situation. One person accurately saw the business opportunity in this and carried it to the extreme, thus spawning a commodity branch for ramen that far exceeded its intrinsic value. With the backing of American flour, ramen got on the fast track in the 1950s. After that, Japan ushered in the period of rapid development known as the post-war economic miracle, lasting until January 1978 when it became the second largest economy in the world. During this period, the most ardent consumers of ramen were still young people and workers engaged in heavy manual labor. The rice and ramen set meal was the best portrayal of this demographic. Restaurants would serve a large bowl of white rice with ramen during lunch hours so that laborers could replenish enough calories. This carb monster combo was also widely spread due to various construction projects after Tokyo successfully bid for the Olympics. But success and failure lie in the same place. Precisely because ramen was so favored by heavy laborers, it created a natural alienation between itself and the middle class once again. Until a businessman named Momofuku Ando created a product known as a product of the times, instant ramen. Born in Taiwan, China, in 1910, his original name was Wu Baifu. Having lost both parents at a young age, he worked as an apprentice in his uncle's textile company from a young age. At 22, using the 190,000 yen inheritance left by his father, he started a business in Taiwan and later acquired Japanese citizenship using his wife Masako Ando's surname. This man was a talent who thrived during World War II. He first bought 25 hectares of land in Hyogo Prefecture to mine coal, then invested in building barracks, and later dabbled in manufacturing aircraft parts. After his business went through several ups and downs, he established Nakakyosha in 1949, which mainly engaged in food trading. What was most impressive about this big shot was that he could accurately grasp the intentions of the government every time and ride the wave to success. During World War II, he made a fortune alongside the Japanese government. After the war, he followed the Americans. At that time, with the U.S. and the Soviet Union locked in a power struggle, the food industry, which was conducive to the stability of Japanese people's livelihoods, received top-level care from the U.S. Meanwhile, the U.S. food relief program also gave entrepreneurs like Momofuku Ando the opportunity to maintain close ties with the government. Momofuku Ando's earliest foray into the instant noodle field originated from a school lunch program promoted by the U.S. The program aimed to make bread the staple lunch for students, but faced resistance from some conservatives. Ando discovered a business opportunity in this and mediated, proposing that noodles should replace bread, elevating this issue to the height of upholding tradition and cultural heritage. Actually, it was quite sanctimonious for a newly naturalized citizen to say such things. But anyway, his statement moved the people in power. However, to make this happen, he still had to solve three problems. The first two came from the US and Japan, and the third came from himself. The first problem was the US requirement. The ramen plan had to guarantee the same amount of nutrition as the American bread lunch plan within a limited budget. The second problem was the Japanese requirement. Ando needed to develop a production technology for ramen that could be mass-produced and easily transported and stored. The third problem was that Ando's own corporate funds and supply channels were insufficient. For Momofuku Ando, the American problem was the easiest to solve because his company had previously dabbled in food nutrition supplements. He had several products for this purpose, such as rice seasoning made from fish powder, bicycle nutrients extracted from animal bone marrow, and his company had even researched extracting nutritional products from boiled frogs. In short, all these fancy things had one thing in common: strong functionality and low cost. In terms of product attributes, they were practically born for instant ramen. The technical issue regarding instant ramen raised by the Japanese government was later solved by Ando sharing patent technology with another company, Tomei Shokai. The earliest patent for instant noodle production technology was not in Ando's hands, but was obtained by a Taiwanese international student named Chong Kuo-wen, and the enterprise behind Chong Kuo-wen was exactly Tomei Shokai. In the end, through a series of business maneuvers, Ando shared this technology with 9 instant noodle manufacturers, including Tomei Shokai. As for the problem of insufficient corporate capital and supply channels, Ando's solution was to cooperate with Mitsubishi Corporation, Japan's largest trading company at the time. After solving these 3 difficulties, the school lunch program should have been a natural win for Ando, but unfortunately, the final outcome of this experience has been lost to history, and it is now unknown whether Ando ultimately secured the school lunch order. But actually, after solving these 3 problems, the school lunch program had become less important. Because after integrating all advantages, on August 25, 1958, Momofuku Ando launched Chicken Ramen, a nutritious and healthy meal priced at 35 yen that only took 2 minutes to prepare. This phenomenal product caused an unprecedented sensation upon release. Momofuku Ando's instant ramen was a massive hit. However, unlike the worship and adoration of him on the Chinese internet, I don't actually think he was a moral saint. He was certainly a successful businessman, but some of his actions were hardly noble. First, the reverence for him on the Chinese internet largely stems from his Taiwanese heritage. But I must tell you, he never mentioned this identity in his autobiography. Instead, he repeatedly emphasized that he was a Japanese hero fighting against Western hegemony and protecting his country's culture. Moreover, the name Nissin, which is now thunderous in the instant noodle industry, was deliberately chosen back then to piggyback on the reputation of Nissin Flour Milling, a leading wheat processing company with a similar name. Additionally, Nissin actually used a lot of nitpicky patent lawsuits in its development to crush countless competitors. But regardless of what kind of person Ando was, Nissin grew stronger relying on its endless marketing activities and corporate culture, the most impressive of which was its product shaping. At that time, Ando managed to turn instant ramen into a high-end nutritional food. He first obtained a special nutritional food certification endorsed by the government by adding vitamins B1 and B2 to the instant ramen, and later introduced the nutritional concept of lysine, making ramen a food highly praised by the middle class. You know the drill. The kid got a perfect score on the test today. Let's cook something nice tonight. What is it? Noodle soup with a vegetable packet. It is said that in recent years, Nissin's annual sales of instant ramen were around 5.5 billion servings, and during the pandemic, this number peaked at 10 billion servings. Speaking of which, I'd like to ask you all, what is your deepest impression of instant noodles? I still remember that afternoon during the summer vacation when my grandfather's work unit distributed a box of food. I opened it and saw what was probably the ultimate VIP version of Master Kong braised beef noodles in a bowl format at the time. I can even recall the tactile sensation of touching its styrofoam packaging with my hands. Instant noodles on the market back then didn't even have a vegetable packet, let alone an oil packet. So every detail was conveying a message to me. Yeah, this is premium and awesome. I really don't think any kid could resist that scene. I had to make a pack on the spot. When the noodles were ready and I lifted the lid, what got sucked in along with the steaming mist was that strong, MSG-laden umami flavor. Forgive me for being unsophisticated, but at that time, I really thought that flavor was just insanely delicious.